on. Alex says, hey, Bradley, if the root domain is for a concrete site, would it be wise to create a subdomain and make it about decks if I want to target deck keyword in the same area? I don't know. You could test that. I've not tested that. I usually going to try to keep domains and subdomains, closely related. It may work. You may want to test it, Alex. I think I know which Alex this is. I think you just ordered a bunch of competitive link analysis reports. I've done 3 of them today already for you, if that's the correct Alex. But in any case, whether it's the right Alex or not, yeah, I've not tested that. It's worth a test, but I don't know whether that'll work or not, to be honest with you. I don't see why it wouldn't. Subdomains are treated as standalone sites, but there's still an association because of the domain. See what I'm saying? So it's not that those are completely unrelated, right? They're still construction, home service based stuff. So you might want to test. I mean, I don't have an answer for you because I've not tested that. I tend to try to keep subdomains and the root domain all very, very closely related, but it certainly could be tested. You know what I mean? The whole point of doing the subdomain thing, guys, is because the more sites you add, so the more subdomains you add to a domain, if you're doing, link building and all that other kind of stuff for each campaign that has its own subdomain, the domain benefits and accrues like a cumulative effect from all of the subdomain activity. And so it ends up becoming a very powerful domain over time, so that when you deploy subsequent subdomains, right? So other campaigns on other subdomains, they tend to perform a lot faster, a lot quicker, because they're benefiting from the authority of the domain overall, if that makes sense. And so that's why I do that kind of stuff. I've been doing that for years and it works. It works really well. The disadvantage is you end up with, a bunch of different sites to manage. And you don't ever want to do anything stupid to catch a penalty on the root domain, because if you catch a penalty on a root domain in this sort of a setup, then all of the subdomains are gone. You've lost everything, right? Everything will be penalized. But if you just keep this root domain as something clean, non-spammy, you don't do anything really aggressive, then if you were to catch a penalty against a subdomain, it's going to isolate to that specific subdomain, and that's it. It doesn't affect other subdomains. Okay. Costco membership says, what happens if a site drops and blames your links? Since you don't have a contract to cover liability, are you worried about any of that? Well, no, but there's a disclaimer on my services, my sites that state if you're using our services, you understand that we're not guaranteeing results. SEO is a volatile business. What we are producing, what we provide are services that have historically shown, to produce results, but we're not guaranteeing results or none of that. That, by the way, that's a great question, just so you know. It's not from link building. I mean, good luck. They can try. They can try all day long. But that is precisely one of the reasons we do not do on-page optimization, where for any of our white label clients, we don't. I get asked all the time, especially after delivering a full SEO audit, where I give them all of the instructions. They say, is there any way that you or somebody on your team can do this for me or for my client? Absolutely not. There's no way, there's no way that I'm opening up that can of liability worms, right? That can of worms of liability for getting access to a client's account. Do you see what I'm saying? Remember, my client is the SEO professional or agency or whatever. So my client is the agency. It's their client that then they would have to give us access as the white label provider to their clients' accounts, their website, etc. And guess who would get blamed if anything were to happen to the website during the time that we had login credentials? Whether we did it or not, guess who would get blamed? We would. So that is precisely why it's our policy. No, we will not. Absolutely not. Will we do any on-page optimization execution for anything other than a GBP? I'll do it for a GBP, but not for a website. And so that to answer your question, like with link building, we put disclaimers on our services to say, like, we're not guaranteeing anything. SEO is a volatile business. What we are selling are things that have shown to produce results consistently, but there's no guarantee to any of this, and you understand that by using our services, essentially. As far as on-page stuff, that's precise. If I were to get involved, which we won't, but doing on-page, getting access to clients' accounts and all that stuff, we likely would have some sort of a legal agreement that would have to be signed by all parties to make sure that it would protect us from any potential lawsuits as a white label provider, right? Brian says, if you start with a new domain as the root domain, how long until the subdomains and root begin to rank versus using a ranked root domain? I'm not sure I understand the question. If you start with a new domain as the root domain, how long until the subdomains and root begin to rank versus using a ranked root domain? Again, I don't understand. If you already have a ranked root domain, I don't understand the question, Brian. Forgive me. If you could restate it in a way that may be a little bit more clearer to me, I'll try to answer your question. All right, I'm going to move on, guys. We'll jump back in a minute to that. I'll come back to that in a minute, Brian. All right, so moving on. I want to use some of that root domain's power to rub off on the subdomain. Smart or no? Yeah, I mean, you can try that. Again, different, service categories. Try it. I talked about this in the mastermind actually when the example that I mentioned earlier on today's Hump Day Hangout when I was talking about internal link elements, and I said, like, for example, an HVAC contractor that does HVAC, electrical, and plumbing, which a lot of them do. Those are three very distinct service categories. And I've talked about testing where you have a branded root domain, but then you would have three subdomain sites, one for each of those service categories. One subdomain for HVAC.brand.com, one for plumbing.brand.com, one for electrical.brand.com. Do you see what I'm saying? That way you have three distinct sites that are set up and fully optimized for that specific service category. Those tend to perform. Now, I've not tested that. That was a proposal, a hypothesis. But what I'm saying is I know for a fact, I have tested that the more focused you can make a site, both topically and geographically, the better it performs. Like, you understand that? So the more narrow of a geography you're trying to target with a site, the better it tends to perform. The more narrow the topics of the site. So like if it's a service-based business, the more, if you can optimize a site for one service category, entirely for one service category, and all the supporting services within that service category, it tends to perform better than if you were to have a site that's optimized for three service categories like HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. You see what I'm saying? So that would be something worth testing, would be to like create a brand domain where the homepage, the root domain, is about the brand contact information with links in the menu, navigation menu, et cetera, that link down to each subdomain site. And then have a separate subdomain for HVAC, one for electrical, one for plumbing. And then now each one of those are separate sites. Now you have 3 sites to manage versus 1. Well, you got 4 sites to manage versus 1, right? Because you got the root domain and then 3 subdomain sites. But again, my hypothesis is those 3 individual sites would perform better than they would for each of the queries related to those than they would be had they all been on one site. You see what I'm saying? So would this work? Most likely. I've just not tested it. So try it again.